Marta and we have the honor to facilitate this discussion. We'll be focusing on the role of accountability and participation in health and development goals. Is this mic working? Hello? Yes? Okay. Accountability is a word that is used by many global actors. It's a word that the World Bank promotes and has a line of work. It's also a word that has reached the highest levels of the United Nations. And yet it's also a word that has led to a lot of mobilization by social movements and rights-based organizations. Yet there are very different interpretations of what is in that word. And I think the panel today will engage with what are the risks and opportunities in engaging in these global spaces where other global actors are defining the meaning of accountability. But how does it, what are the opportunities of that? But also, how do we shape those opportunities if we want to put citizens first? If we want to sort of reclaim what accountability means to citizens on the ground and how it promotes change on the ground. So we'll be talking about how accountability and participation is part of the global related goals in the SDGs, universal health coverage, but also looking at what are the linkages with processes on the ground. How do we shape local level mobilization? Are there linkages? What are the opportunities, risks? What are key principles that shape local mobilization that are really relevant when we then go back to the global space? And we have participants here who will speak from many different backgrounds to help shape the conversation, including looking at not just local social movements, citizens-based organizing, but also what's the role of knowledge in that. So the role of local actions, but also what kind of knowledge, who shapes accountability and how, and what are the implications for both local level action as well as global level action. So let me pass the mic on to Marta, who will do a quick round of introductions, and then we'll get started with some overview reflections by the panelists. And then we have a few questions that we want to engage with across the panelists. We will welcome any and all of your questions. So I believe someone is collecting. We're meant to be receiving questions from you. Is there someone? Who should they pass questions to?
There's a number.
There's a number.
The same number that they wrote yesterday.
Oh, okay. We're not writing them down on notes and passing them to the front? No.
You can also do that.
Okay. So those of you, WhatsApp? Okay. So those of you who can access the WhatsApp number, send it through the WhatsApp number. If you can't do that, please write your question down and find someone to pass it down to us. And Marta and I will endeavor to look through them and feed them back to the panelists. And at any time you want to send a comment or a question, they're most welcome. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So we're going to have each of our panelists speak, and then we will ask some questions. So first is Walter Flores. Walter is the director of the Center for the Study of Equity and Governance in Health Systems, an interdisciplinary civil society organization based in Guatemala. The organization works to improve human rights and the right to health of indigenous and other marginalized populations. Walter is also a member of the COPASA steering committee.
So what I'm going to talk in the next 5 minutes is trying to set the situation that we have with these global initiatives and goals, and what does it mean for a community-based organization or civil society organization, and for marginalized populations, which they are the center of whatever development global goals we have. And so let's just start. For me, the UHC and the SDGs are very similar in the sense that they are trying to close gaps. But what I find interesting is like with the motto, the SDGs, so leave no one behind, it gives you the idea that those that have been left behind is because of an accident that we didn't think about it. But if you look at the situation, those who are behind is no accident at all. They are left behind first because of many reasons. One of them is because of design, policy designs that on purpose leave people behind. As an example, those policies not providing services for immigrants, that's no accident, that's by design, countries decide to leave outside of service provision migrants, just an example. But also people are being left behind because of denial. As an example, when authorities decide not to provide identity cards to some specific populations, and because of no identity cards, they cannot access services. So people are left behind because of a denial of identity, but also people are being left behind because of non-compliance of what is established. So in some countries, some laws and regulations already state that some population groups, because of social exclusion, they should have priority, or they should receive specific budget allocations, and authorities, by non-compliance, they do not deliver those resources. They do not allocate the funding. So if you see, only with these three examples, we can clearly see that it's no accident at all. So then the question that we must ask is that, as we saw yesterday in the panel, if there is already an international convention on human rights, there is also possibilities of judicialization of the rights. So all of these reasons why people are being left behind, it seems to me like an abuse of power to a grand scale. Despite having all of this and having omissions, people being left because of omission, because of denial, because of non-compliance, is abusing power, loss of power. So if that is the situation, in my view, we cannot start including those being left behind just by improving data quality, just by improving the indicators, which, if you can see, a lot of the discussion in the SDGs is about which indicator are we going to use. Is it going to be the other one? Is it going to agree on new indicators? And as we can imagine, it's really not about the indicator. It's about whether those in power are going to stop abusing of their power that they have done so far. And for that, my comment is that no single technical intervention, such as improving indicators, is going to tackle these abuses of power. For that, what we require is a comprehensive strategy to confront, to negotiate, and to build power. No single, again, this is strategies that go beyond improving data collection. Of course, in some cases, some information, some new indicators may just open the door to further discussion, but data by itself, especially vertical data, is not confronting these abuses of power. And I'm just going to give you very quickly some examples of the kind of strategies that I'm talking about when we say strategies to confront power. For instance, in our case in Guatemala, what we have done together with community-based organizations, but also with other organizations that are allies to this movement, they are experts in public budgeting, but also experts in legal frameworks. We have been identifying what we call accountability bottlenecks. Because we have the formal description of how the system works, but still it's not working. So why is it not working? So by having inputs from different experts, but also from users of services, we have been able to map out accountability bottlenecks to see which one do we need to tackle so we can see that the system starts flowing. The second strategy, which is very important, is engaging the users of services to produce their own data and their own evidence that would say that whatever the authorities are collecting on information is actually not relevant for the kind of barriers they are facing. So for that, it's very important the process in which the users of services themselves understand the information, collect their own evidence, and use that evidence to negotiate with authorities about correction mechanism. A third one, which is very important, is how to move from a confrontation between service providers in a very resource-limited context, which is the face of the public services, and the user, that they are usually in conflict. They are in tension. In our experiences, that always happened at the beginning. Very frustrated users of services and very frustrated service providers, frontline providers that do not have resources, so there is a tension there. But eventually, through reflection, how they can start working together, so they see that both of them are just victims of the system, and they should work together to exercise accountability upwards. A concrete example of that is that in Guatemala, once they reach that level of identifying that actually we're just victims here, we have the situation of service providers becoming whistleblowers, telling users and telling us where the corruption is or why the system is not working. And that information has been crucial to the organization, first to start demanding accountability on these issues of corruption, but also to use that information to start legal cases, to bring cases to the Ombudsman office, to bring cases to Parliament. And that information is only possible because the service providers themselves are passing that information because they want the system to change. So this is the kind of strategies, that confront power, but also negotiate situation with power. And these are the ones that we need. And finally, in this comprehensive strategy, we also need to have strategies to protect ourselves, because there's going to be backlash. There's usually backlash on this situation. Every time that you confront power, there is a chance of having a backlash. So because of this, a comprehensive strategy to advance and to really leave no one behind must include a specific strategies and actions to protect people from retaliation from those in power, but also to protect people from physical violence, and also to protect people from illegal procedures that try to put them in jail. In our situation, we have had community leaders that have been falsely accused by authority of different crimes, so they stopped doing the work that they're doing. So we have been having alliances with the lawyers so they can actually work in the judiciary system to help these community leaders. And I'll stop here.
Thank you, Walter, for opening the space, for this conversation, distinguished participant. So my task is to look at the gaps, between the global and the local accountability initiatives and structures. But before we begin to look at what are the gaps, it's important to understand what are the global accountability structures and also what are the local structures. Now, what is the gap in between? Many of you will remember in 2000, the United Nations established the Commission on Information and Accountability, the COIA, as part of accelerating the MDGs, because at that particular time, there was a sluggish progress, for the MDGs. And the Commission was focusing on monitoring for resources, that's finances, monitoring for results, and also monitoring for the rights, the remedial action. And based on that commission, an independent expert review group was established to keep providing recommendation over the 5 years to achieve the MDG up to the 2015. And in 2015, after the MDG and SDG came into being, then the UN also established the independent accountability panel and also assigned the Partnership for Maternal and Newborn Health based in WHO Geneva to create alignment and also coordination among the Every Woman, Every Child initiatives. And also, you also aware of the Astana Declaration, which is a 40-year journey after the Alma Mater in 1978. Now, all these are the global structures to engage in accountability. You're also aware of the UHC 2030. It is established the steering committee to also drive the agenda for the UHC. And you are also aware that recently in New York, for the UNGA Assembly, the Global Action Plan for SDG 3 was launched to accelerate also progress in SDGs and also accountability. And also there was a high-level political forum. I'm sure many of you were there when there's a political declaration on the UHC. Now, all these are accountability structures at the global level, and they are all calling for accountability for resources, for results, and also for the rights. But these accountability structures, as we all know, many, they are in New York and Geneva, and many at times, that's where they stay. Now, the local structures at country level is to see that at every country level, we have the multi-stakeholder and multi-sectoral platforms at country level that will also be reviewing, monitoring, and also taking remedial action. We have the parliamentarians, which also supposed to be an oversight of the executive to deliver on the mandate, of the people of the country. Also, many countries also have the health committees, at the facility level to also provide the right of the patient and to ensure that there's a synergy and communication between the patients, the consumers, and also the healthcare providers. So these are the example of the local structures. And the other one I mentioned are the global structures. There's a huge gap. Now, this huge gap is access to information, from the global, descending down to the local. Many at times, we don't even know what is going on at the global. You can go to any country, talk to any civil society, talk to any practitioner, and ask them about the Global Action Plan. Ask them about the SDGs, the UHC 2030. They don't know what is going on. And also, many at times, these global partners, they stay at the global level. There is no clear mechanism. There is no clear connection between the global structures and the local structure. And because of that, the global community at times cannot hold the countries account to whatever they are doing. The global community, there is no clear accountability processes to ensure that the local is also driving the vertical and horizontal accountability. This is a huge gap that we have been seeing over the time, but we hope that with this COPASA, with these wonderful practitioners, we'll begin to engage meaningfully to close the gap between the global and the local structures. So we hope that we're going to get further questions to explain the how and also what needs to be done in trying to bridge these global structures on accountability and the local so that there's a connection, there's a synergy, there's information sharing, there's a two-way traffic of engaging the stakeholder to ensure that the accountability for health is achieved. Thank you.
I just want to share a few kind of ideas and lessons that IBP has learned and are trying to put in practice to shape some of our work to support people's efforts to get public resources to be used for public services, including health. So I think a lot of this starts with our understanding of the nature of the problems and challenges that we're facing. If we understand health gaps as primarily technical, then a widgets approach, to use Anu Joshi's term, might be sufficient. If we understand it as just the wrong policies that are based on a lack of evidence, then generating evidence and providing that to policymakers will be sufficient. But if we understand them as systems that are producing these outcomes based on a number of characteristics, and in some cases design characteristics, as Walter pointed out, or in other cases unintentional consequences of complex intersecting actors and other factors, then we have to use systematic approaches. And if we understand that many contexts, there are sufficient resources to provide more inclusive and equitable health, then we understand that it's about political decision making and it's about the power relations that underpin those political decisions. So it's really about navigating power, understanding politics, and working within systems. So for IBP, when we started to think about our work through that kind of systems and power lens, it really opened up a new way of thinking and a new way of acting. It reinforced our understanding that there was no simple or direct solution. Rather, it was the longer journey of navigating and working to strengthen accountability ecosystems, understanding the accountability bottlenecks that Walter just mentioned. Fundamental to this is the role of people and communities, not because of any kind of lefty ideology, although there's a bit of that too, but it's much more practical. If we're thinking about power and power relationships, we really need to think about how people can be instrumental in realizing rebalances in that power and deepening democracy. So we started to think about kind of citizen agency, collective citizen agency, citizens mobilizing, organizing, engaging within these systems as a core part of our strategy to rebalance power. So we started thinking and working through this system lens with collective citizen action and agency as a core focus. Now we know that particularly for marginalized people, organizing themselves is a challenge. They face many barriers to collective action, and even more so to creating and sustaining organizations that are internally democratic and really enable citizens to have a voice as collective actors. But we still said, well, let's take a look and try to find what kinds of organizations like that exist and use that as a starting point, or at least look at how citizens are actively engaged in collective action and use that as our starting point rather than kind of going in as an NGO and saying, well, we're going to be the starting point. So, but I think similar to our discussions over the past few days, we know that civic action, people's struggles, community action is seldom sufficient on its own, particularly given the systemic nature of the problems that communities face and given the deep inequalities of power that they are challenging in many circumstances. So while we remain rooted in civic action and people's collective action, we also said as an organization like IBP and many of the partners that we work with, we can bring other tools, approaches, and resources to buttress and complement civic action. So we talk, or we work to convene and support broader coalitions, including actors inside and outside of the state. We've talked a lot about bringing service providers into coalitions with marginalized people. That often requires kind of a neutral broker or a convener to bring those kinds of coalitions together. It means expanding the information available to citizens and the spaces in which they can engage in decision making and monitoring of services. We know that many of those spaces exist on paper, but in practice are not spaces that citizens can enter or can meaningfully engage or shape. We do think that there are accountability actors and accountability mechanisms in many contexts that can be leveraged. Again, citizens can have a role here, but they often need support to kind of make accountability legible to their demands and claims and make sure that accountability bolsters and supports their action. And then also thinking about the ideas and discourses that so often shape broader perceptions, including of marginalized actors themselves, about how they fit into the systems, how legitimate their claims are, whether there are resources and whether the resources are limited or if there are just decisions to make those resources limited. So challenging and engaging with those resources. So for IBP and I think for other nonprofit organizations working in this space, it forced us to kind of shift from a frame of mind of seeking direct action, either through kind of direct advocacy or delivering services, to really looking at kind of working indirectly, leading from behind, working on the intangibles that can shape and enable civic action in a more strategic, as we've been talking about in these days, strategic way, linking up actors, linking them across the spaces and gaps in the system where they can be most effective.
First, yeah, it's a true honor to be here and to be listening into all these practitioner experiences. I will speak today about the sphere of global health knowledge. And I will be referring to a lot what has already been said. It's very nice to be standing on the shoulders of giants. But I first would like to start with quoting Helen de Beukelare. She's a Rwandan Belgian activist. And she has said, in relation not really to global health knowledge, but still, that our concept of knowledge is a colonized one. We tend to accept things more readily when they come in a certain form, and be it a book, and I will add here a scientific article, a lecture, or the loudest voice in the room, just generally when it comes from white cisgender men. As you know, global health knowledge and complex social interventions such as accountability and the knowledge generation process of it has been hampered by a very biomedical, linear and elitist approach to global health, of which the pyramid or hierarchy of evidence, where systematic reviews, meta-analysis, it's a sort of statistical form, and also RCTs are at the top and case studies are at the bottom. This hierarchy of evidence, together with global focus across the board, SDGs, UHC, Walter has also mentioned this, as performance targets, has obfuscated the fact that this work on governance and accountability are in fact grounded in decades and year-long work, and I mean decades, of community-based organizations, women's organizations, grassroots, and the like. The over-appearance in peer-reviewed health journals of singular short-term interventions, which are often donor-funded, and who can also fund the publications, of course, with technocratic solutions, which are limited in space and time, and with immediate effects, is in fact a distortion of reality. It's a skewed view, because these distort what is successful, and especially who is successful in governance and accountability. Yesterday, for example, someone spoke about the Dalit struggle, which has been going on and is still going on for 20 years. This does not come out of a peer-reviewed evidence or of a meta-analysis. And also, these papers, in the focus has been too much on the material innovation itself, but not on how it changes power dynamics. As Abhijit said yesterday, we have to hope, and there is some sparkle, and it's Diwali almost, at the end of the tunnel. If you compare with 10 years ago, there is increasingly acceptance of alternative forms of knowledge. And this is also a good example. Yesterday we had a lot of sessions on indigenous knowledge, for example with Arima Mishra. And you have this acceptance more and more of the need of continuous learning instead of looking for a final truth or a definite knowledge. There's more recognition of the need of implementation research and the need to understand implementation processes brought on by, I think, problems with attaining successes in some countries on MNCH. Even in evidence-based medicine, and an example is the UK Medical Research Council, there is a sort of revolution going on. You need to look at the publications of Trisha Greenhawk on that, where they accept that there are complex interventions who are not easily grasped by RCTs. There are also not new, but innovative research and evaluation methodologies that are more and more recognized by donors and the like, which draw out how context can trigger certain patterns in certain contexts and not in others, allowing us to link case studies across settings and to build together theory. For example, realist evaluation, qualitative comparative analysis, comparative politics, and theory-driven inquiry. Maybe to a lesser extent, but still, we are growing bolder, such as Compassa, in presenting other forms of knowledge, such as visual sociology. More and more documentaries appear in global health conferences, and the rediscovery of indigenous knowledge. And lastly, I would say there's also an increasing recognition of COPs and recognizing the work of civil society. But I'm not sure how far we are with that. I think we can be a bit gloomy and say that progress has been very slow and that we're at this moment, as someone said yesterday, not in the time of HIV/AIDS or in the time of Alma-Ata, and that we need to be more, to get our forces together. So how can we speed up the process? I think I heard a lot the past days about exchange and social and organizational learning between ourselves. I think there's a lot of potential in that, and we need to do an agenda on that and do twinning, mentoring, and so on. And also draw in the countries that are not here, like, for example, the Francophone West African countries. We also need to define our global research agenda. There are some issues that we haven't really grasped, maybe in detail. How and when are we really shifting power dynamics? When in the policy process